Thanks everybody for coming today, and thanks for being patient. So today we have Tahlia here today to share about the resume guru. And you can find us online. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we'll upload all the all the talks later to the YouTube channel. And today we have job opportunities open at Eliza. We want to share with you guys today. Anna, who is one of our ladies, works there, and thanks her to share these opportunities with us. So just have a look at them and then apply through the link. And if you would like to give a seminar, please feel free to DM us on Twitter and send us emails. And a big thanks to our amazing and faithful list of sponsors. And now we have our speakers today. Yay. So finally, thanks for joining us today. You can join in anytime.
Look, thank you so much for everyone who's tuning in, who wants or came along to listen to me, or just came along and I happen to be here. But basically, I have been recruiting for several years now, particularly in the IT industry. I have worked a lot with data analysis, Python, R, that sort of skill set as well. And throughout our recruitment agency across Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, we sort of focus on in these sort of fields. So basically what I've done throughout COVID, things were a bit quiet, and I thought the thing that I wanted to do most was actually help people who were struggling to find a job and provide them with confidence with either their application through their resumes, building that up to be more acceptable or sort of a cut above the rest, and then also building their confidence up when it comes to interviewing and knowing what to say and understanding sort of what the interviewer is asking for you. So that I've actually developed this business called the Resume Guru by Tahlia, whereby I sort of give those advice. So this presentation today is basically giving as much information as I can to help you understand any sort of benefits. And I hope there's definitely some key takeaways that you might learn or reiterate and help each of you with your applications in the future. So I will go to the next page. So a little bit about who I am, which I've obviously just mentioned. So I've been recruiting for a few years. I guess in terms of the reason why I'm focusing on these different areas is from when I started finding jobs, I myself found it really difficult. I was going to some interviews and I was being asked questions and I'm thinking, how do I answer this? And I actually moved to Brisbane. So I'm from Victoria, and I moved to Canberra, and then I moved to Brisbane 3 years ago now. So I've had to experience getting a job in a new state where I know nobody and I have no connections, and it just makes it that much more difficult, which I'm sure many of you experience. And I've been in that position where I've been asked questions and I'm thinking, here's my answer. And I'm going on a path and I just know they're losing interest. So I think the key is to be concise, and I'll sort of teach or talk through how to be concise in various situations. So we'll start by a bit of an overview of the job markets in Australia and sort of what to expect, I suppose. I'm assuming many of you are probably not new to the country, or are there some people that might be new to the country today? If you are, you may not be aware of the different types of jobs that one can get as a contractor. So you can start by getting an hourly rate contract, a day rate contract, a fixed term contract, permanent position, then you've got freelance and casual and part-time, which are not full-time positions. So those are sort of the options. So just something to fill in, and this has happened a few times where I've had people confused about the differences. So just so you're aware, when you have an hourly rate, it's usually going to be a shorter term contract, which means you usually can charge a little bit more. So I sort of use like 10% brackets. So either 10% more or 10% less than what you would normally charge yourself at. So if you're going through day rate contracts, your hourly contract can generally be about 10% more. The thing with contracting, whether it's an hourly rate or a day rate, is that you're not entitled to any benefits. So you're there purely as an hourly basis. So any entitlements and benefits that other members of the company have, you won't be entitled to in that case, and you're compensated by earning more money. So day rate contract tend to earn quite well. It's probably like the next step down. And then the next step down is actually a fixed term contract. So I know I've come across many people who didn't know what that was. So it actually is prorated from a salary. So you'll see fixed term over 6 months, and it's not a day rate or an hourly rate. They'll usually provide a salary saying maybe $100,000 prorated fixed term 6 months, which means you'll get paid $50,000 over the course of 6 months. The benefit to this, even though you're not making as much money as general contracts, is you actually are entitled to company benefits. So things like annual leave and sick leave and carers leave, and any other sort of incentives they may have about bonus structures or what have you, you'll be a part of that as well. So that's sort of an overview of the different types of jobs. Information about different job markets. So some of you might be in Melbourne now and struggling to find a job because we're in the middle of a pandemic and Melbourne has been affected greatly. So you may be looking at other options and other states and other cities that you would like to move to. So some options, just to get an understanding, Melbourne and Sydney are the highest rates. Probably Sydney would be out in front for the private sector. So if you're looking to get into the private sector, Sydney will pay the most, but the standard of living is the highest in Australia. So there is that trade-off. But there is also the largest population and the most jobs. So if you're sort of really struggling, that could be an option for you. Melbourne's obviously second to that. There are quite a few jobs. We do have a recruitment agency down there who has still been doing quite well in getting roles on. So there are things out there. It just have to be probably a bit more clever about the process that you go through to be shortlisted in this case, and that sort of that area to focus on. Canberra is another area. So I just want to talk about Canberra because it is very public sector heavy, which means government contracting, government positions, and that provides a bit of stability. So if you're someone who wants to be in a job and I don't want to keep changing jobs every 2 years to get a promotion, or I don't want to jump around in fast paced, I want to be well structured in a really prioritized sort of sector that sort of has many benefits and I can be comfortable that this is going to be my career here on out, then the public sector might be for you. And Canberra is notorious for being public sector. It's obviously where Parliament is and where a lot of government, state departments are based. So that could be an option. I know my dad, he contracts there and he's getting paid more than he was getting contracted when he was contracting through Sydney in a private company working for government. So monetarily, it does pay very well. The standard of living expense is actually quite high, but the rate of, if you're looking into real estate and things like that, it's actually continuing to grow. So there is a lot of growth in that space. So that could potentially be an option. Next, you've got Brisbane. We're sort of an up and coming market. There's a lot of transitions that are being made. We've recently had, I believe it was Santos and I think QIC, which are very large companies that have actually been transferred from Melbourne and Sydney to Queensland, which brought a lot of jobs up here. So we are sort of bubbling along. We don't have as many as Sydney and Melbourne has to offer, but the standard of living, the expense of living is much lower. So purchasing a house, I don't earn a lot of money, but I am able to purchase one. There is no way I could ever buy a house in Sydney, probably not in 50 years, maybe wait for my parents to pass away before I could look at that. And Melbourne, again, is very expensive for someone like me. So it does sort of look at opportunities, quality of life, what you're looking for. Those are things to consider. In terms of salary expectations, I won't go into that because I don't want to bore everybody, but in terms of what to understand or expect, I actually do have a salary guide. So if anyone is interested to know what their market is looking to pay, please let me know and I can send you through a copy of that and you can inform yourself. And overview of how to look at job searches. I'll actually go into that in another slide. But there are sort of a few key things to focus on when you're looking for a job. It's not just how you apply for it, but it's how you find the right job as well. So there's a couple of other tips that I'll mention shortly. Along the way, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to just type it in the search bar or just write it down, and at the end I'll do a Q&A sector so you can sort of ask them towards the end. So a question that I get from a lot of people is, I'm applying to lots of roles, why don't I hear back from a recruiter or hiring manager? And I've sort of ascertained in my career there's two main reasons. One, you're not in the state and they have better people that are in the state or in the country, or to do with visa, or something to do with physically being in the office. This is obviously slightly changing with, you know, the pandemic. People are starting now to become more and more open to that, but typically that's been one reason. And the second reason is your resume wasn't suitable to what the position was. So these are the two main reasons. So why I mentioned resumes is because, as boring as it can be, I mean, I hate it. I hate writing my own resume. I can write anybody else's, but when it comes to writing mine, I hate it. It's not fun. It's the most boring thing to do, to talk about yourself professionally. But when you are looking at writing and submitting an application, and it is a job that you want, and you're finding that you're applying to jobs and you're not getting feedback, it is really important to tailor your resume per application. Now, some people ask me about cover letters, and some people ask me about statements of suitability. I would say personally, from my experience, that is not really necessary, and it's a little bit of a waste of time. It's to do with the resume that they're more focused on. Okay, so I was just talking about resumes and how it's important to change your resume per role, and it's more important to change your resume than to write a cover letter. I will mention a side note: if you are applying to the public sector, it is often mandatory to supply a cover letter. And if you don't, it generally doesn't look good if it's not specifically stated. So if you're applying for public sector roles, it's generally good to have a bit of a template that you can sort of change per position. So that's generally required there. Now, there's a couple of things which are essential to include, and I cannot mention this enough, and I know writing resumes is boring and changing it's really boring, but there's essential things you absolutely need to do. You can't just flick your resume onto any role that you see is relevant for you. If you go, oh, data analysis, yep, I'm a data analyst, apply, because you'll find you won't get any results. It's sort of, you know, if you're running a race and you run 15 races a year, but you didn't train for any of them, then you're probably not going to win a single one. So it comes down to reading your advert. So you have to read your ad very clearly. You have to understand exactly what they're looking for. Some companies' ads are more well written than others, but if you have a look at the style, the first thing you'll notice is the style. So there was a company that I was recruiting for, and the end of their interview, at the end of the advert, they said, when you apply, mention what your favorite superhero is. So it was quite a geeky company, but they love that. They love someone to thrive on geekiness. So lots of people applied and they never even read the question. They never added it and they never did anything. And those people were immediately rejected, because not only did they lack attention to detail for that position, but they also didn't demonstrate the key thing that they were looking for. And that's what it was, geekiness. So to read an advert and to ascertain what they're looking for is almost like when you have an exam and you have, what do they call it? Just literacy English exam, where they say read this statement and ascertain the following, you know, is this person happy, is this person sad? So it's sort of getting the vibe from what they're looking for. And you can tell if they're making jokes, then make a joke in yours, you know, make your profile a little bit funny, put some humor in. If they're very serious and very structured and they have a very clear sector of what is essential criteria, what are key skills, what is your role and responsibilities, then structure your resume accordingly. So it's important to sort of feel the sense, because you'll find when you do this, it will take you probably an extra half hour per application, but you'll get more and more traction in a market that's quite difficult and challenging at the moment. So that's sort of like a classic do. In terms of things to include and not to include. So a lot of people will write their resume and they'll add some things like marital status. They'll mention things like their home address. Those things aren't necessary. Like, I know some people even put their father's and their mother's name in. I'm not sure why. I don't know if this is a cultural thing in other areas, but this is absolutely not essential information. So don't feel the need to put those in. Some really essential do's: if you have a name that's not a typical Australian name, the first question you're probably going to be asked, even if you went to school here, is what's your visa, what's your status, what's this, what's that. Like that, you're probably going to find that a lot. So if you have on your resume straight away citizen, permanent resident, this style of visa, that style of visa, put it up in the top right hand corner, and then immediately, you know, they're going to find out if you're suitable or not suitable for that, you know, if you can work full-time or can't work full-time, or if it's part-time, what have you. So that is essential. That's something I would mention to say. You can, if you don't have to add your full address, but you can add your suburb, particularly if the job is close to you. If the job is not close to you and you add your suburb, they're going to ask, why would you want to work here? Why can't you find a job close to you? Are you happy with the commute? Are you happy to relocate? All these sort of questions. So you want to make it really clear. If you are applying for a role in Brisbane, you're currently based in Melbourne, it's really important to demonstrate that you have already got plans to move to Brisbane, even if you don't. And I shouldn't be saying this, but it is going to help you if you are genuinely going, I just need a job, I can't get a break. Why aren't these, you know, interstate clients even messaging me back? It's because they think unreliable. If you get a job where you are now, you're probably going to take it. So consider your level of commitment to moving if you are considering. If you are going, this job in Brisbane, if they offer me, I will move from it, maybe not in lockdown, but you know what I'm saying? If I will move 100% if they offer me, not if someone down the road offers me first, because I'm committed to this job. So make sure you have that level before you sort of you know, jump into it, and that will give them a sense of confidence and say, my best friends live in Brisbane, or, you know, I moved to Brisbane, I went on holiday, I've already bought a house, or I've already renting, or I've already messaged people to rent with who I've rented with before. Say a story, don't stray from the truth, don't completely make it up, but make a story that gives them confidence that you are committed to moving and they can rely on you. So that's the only concern that people are going to have with interstate applications. Also, when it comes to get a professional to help you, you'll probably find that you're getting more calls and making more applications to recruiters than you are to direct companies. And that is because especially skills such as R, Python, any of these sort of, anything AI, anything quite technical, data science, analytics, any of that is quite a niche skill. Well, not a niche skill, but it's quite a challenging skill. It's not something people are going to find an abundance of. So it means that you're going to have people who have a difficult to fill role, and they're going to ask a recruitment agency to find it, because that's what we do. We don't fill easy, you know, customer service roles. We fill really difficult, skilled positions. So you'll find you're getting a lot of recruiters calling you. Now, a recruiter makes a very quick decision if you're suitable or not, and it's pretty much based on your resume and your spiel. So I'll move on to that in the next slide, your spiel. But talking about your resume, if you're talking to them, before I move on to what they decide on, I'll just mention asking help. So if you're talking to a recruiter and they're talking about putting you forward, it is more than okay to ask them, but before you do, what would you suggest? Tell me any more information about the company that can help me. Do you think my resume is good and suitable for this position and other positions that are like that? What would you change about my resume? What do you like? What don't you like? Everyone has an opinion. Everyone's going to have a slightly different opinion, but you'll find a general consensus of what is good and what is bad. So my suggestion is get a professional's advice. Even a friend who's in a professional level who may have hired in the past, it's really good to have someone else's eyes over it. So that, I think that's an important suggestion. So moving on to the spiel and the interview, the resume. So they'll obviously look at your resume, they'll make the decision, but they'll also listen to the spiel and the way you talk. So Confidence is key. And the only way we can become confident is by knowing something. You're more confident to talk about something you know than something you don't know. It's typical. So when it comes to talking about, hello, this is Tahlia calling from JDP Recruitment Agency. I've seen you've recently updated your resume on Seek. I'm currently recruiting for a R position. Are you interested to chat? And then you say, yes, I am. Tell me a bit about yourself then. And then you talk. So in this moment, it's important to have your 30-second spiel, and you'll generally start interviews with this spiel. You'll start any phone call with this spiel. But essentially what this spiel is it's a very concise timeline of your skills that are relevant to the position that they're calling you for. So if they say it's an R position, and obviously you have to mention your R skills. If it's something different, you mention those skills. So you have to quickly ascertain what they're looking for, but a timeline of your skills. I've been to uni, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, you know, and the more you practice it, the more confident you feel. These are my skills, this is what I can do, this is what I'm looking for. Like, that's ultimately what you need to say. So that is something that I can help you with individually as well, but it's important to sort of consider these things so you're not left going, I think my name's Tahlia, and then it just gets a bit awkward and they think you don't know what you're talking about. So it's good to consider that. So what an interviewer wants from you is, again, clear, concise answers. And it's hard to think of them on the spot. So it's always good to consider how to respond to typical questions. There's sort of a short list of questions that you'll always be asked. And if you sort of look into it or consider what they could be or consider previous interviews, you know, tell me a bit about you. What is your understanding of this skill? You know, there's typical things you're going to be asked, which is easy to figure out what they would be. So considering an answer prior is really important so you can be concise. Body language is another one. So not just the way in which you're sitting, it's the way in which you're presenting yourself. So if you're being like quite small and quiet, and I have coached people with this before, like when I've put them forward for jobs, I've had people who sort of look down, they don't look confident, they're not really mumbling, you know, they're not really saying clearly. Someone who's looking at you like that is going to think you're not confident in your skills because you're not confident to talk to me. And it may be incorrect, but it's the image that they get. So sitting up straight, like, you know, don't try not to hunch, sit up straight, but try to look comfortable, you know, like if they're sitting back in their chair, it's okay to sort of feel a bit more comfortable. If they're sitting very upright, you know, it's the mirroring thing. You've probably heard this 1,000 times, but it is important. And if you can sort of see that, think about your hands, you know, like I'm a very gesture person. I talk with my hands a lot and it can be off-putting sometimes. I had a date with a guy once and the whole time he was looking at my hands and I'm thinking this is so embarrassing. But it's good to sort of, if you play with your hands like me, put them under the desk and just sit them on your knee or something like that. But consider, you know, look at yourself in the mirror, how you normally sit, and think about how you could sit better or how you could portray yourself better. So, and on with body language, if you're open and you're smiling and you look happy and you're going interested, you know, you're changing your facial expressions, you're changing your tone. This is important because it gives like a story about you as opposed to staying monotone. It makes them think you're bored or disinterested. So think about the way you speak. It's almost like a presentation, but try to put some emotion into it. Typical do's and don'ts. One thing I have to say, I'm sure everyone here is fine, but make sure you do wear deodorant to your interview. It can be very hot. It's getting into summer. It's something that I can forget sometimes, but it's important to do that because I have had actually probably 3 times in my career client call me up and say they were good, but they really didn't smell nice. And it's quite an awkward conversation to have with someone to tell them to use it. So definitely do that. Do another important thing actually is to understand the company, understand the person you're meeting with. Sometimes not everyone has this information, but if you do have access to it, utilize it. Look into this person. If you see them on LinkedIn, maybe you did a quick stalk on Facebook and you see they've recently had a kid, or they have recently attained an AWS certificate or a Salesforce certificate or something that you can relate to in some way, shape or form, that small talk before the interview actually begins, that's your space to show them a side of you that isn't fully professional, but how your attitude is in general. So without making it too complicated, make some small talk based on something you've seen that might interest them and get them talking. Because if they're relaxed as well and they think, oh, this is someone I can get on with, they'll also be nicer to you in the interview. In terms of mock interviews, this is something that I really suggest as well. Even if it's just a friend, ask them to say, okay, find me 10 questions on the internet and ask them to me, and try to be quite serious. Dress yourself up, make yourself feel presentable. If someone like me, I mean, I'm in interviews all day, every day. So if I change job, I'd feel very comfortable in an interview room. But if you're not someone like that, it can be quite nerve-wracking, especially some offices these days. They look perfect, they're very precise, they're very neat. You feel it's not a comfortable environment. You're not sitting on someone's couch. So it is important to sort of feel comfortable by doing something, and that is by repetition. So get a friend to help you, get a professional to give you a mock interview, book in a session, whatever you feel comfortable with. To have that experience is invaluable. So that's something that I really do suggest. So next thing I want to talk about is how to find a job in a pandemic. We've never experienced this in our lifetimes, so it's very new, but I've been recruiting in it for 6 months. It's been a very challenging 6 months, but I have definitely some key takeaways for people that have been successful in an industry which has not been hiring typically. So the first one is obvious: dedication, resilience. As a recruiter, I get knocked back. I do business development calls. They're horrible. I'm calling people I've never spoken to saying, hey, do you want to pay a lot of money for me to find you someone for your team? I get knocked back probably out of 100 calls, 98 of them. So dedication and resilience in my job is something that we have to get used to. But if you're not in a job like that, it can be really tough and it can put you down. And if you get constant rejection emails, you don't feel good and your esteem feels low and your confidence is low. So I think just accepting that you are going to get more rejection than normal is the first step to sort of understanding the process. And then you just have to realize that you're going to have to try harder in some areas. So being extra thorough, even with a short-term contract, this comes back to the same point I've made a million times. If you take anything away from today, make sure your resume really reflects the position that you're applying for. The more similar it looks, the more likely they're going to hire you or bring you in for an interview anyway. So that's sort of the thing to be thorough with, take your time. Make sure you read over your resume or get other people to make sure there's no grammatical errors as well. I think that's a typical thing that I fix up when I have my sessions, is just to make sure that the grammar looks good and it's clear. You haven't got big chunks of words because no one reads that. It's making it sort of dot points here and then tables here and then making it all very clear and user friendly, I suppose. So that's to do with the thorough. So the other thing is to focus on is when you're being thorough is also keeping lists. So if you've applied for them, now I'm not the type of person who is good at this, but if you are, it's a real advantage to have an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or even just handwritten. Applied for this company, this date, whatever other information, this is the role. So when you get a call saying, hi, it's Bettina calling from KPMG, you're going, okay, I remember that application was this job. One thing I will mention actually is if you do get a call and you're completely off guard, you're shopping or you're in the middle of something and you cannot focus, you have no idea what the job is, it is okay to ask them to call back at another time. It is preferable not to because it's usually, they can forget or you can play phone tag or it can be difficult. But if you are completely thrown, you think, oh, no words are coming to my head, you're completely disorientated, then it is more advisable to get them to call back at a better time where you can sit down, understand, remember the job, remember your spiel, feel like you're in a place where you can give a good side of yourself for 10 minutes because a decision is often made in that 10 minutes. So if you're feeling really flustered and nervous, it's better to do that. So that's another key point. So another thing is to focus on industry. Now, clearly e-commerce is the industry that I have seen as booming. I've actually worked closely with a client over the last 6 months. He was worth, I think his company was valued at $4 million at the beginning of the year. It is now valued at $16 million because when everyone was in lockdown, they were purchasing things online. So anything to do with the e-commerce sector, retail, online brands, fashion, anything you can think of. I mean, there's some companies in Brisbane I can mention. I'm not sure about in Melbourne, but we've got Culture Kings up here. We've got Surf Ski Dive. I think there's Billabong Office. There's any of those sort of stores. They've done really well during this time. So if you focus on the different industries, we've also had government. We're coming up to an election, but I'm assuming probably in the next few months we'll start to see a boom in government hiring. Everyone's sort of been really close on the budget, but they're getting quite a good budget presumably. So we will probably see that. I'm not sure about Melbourne elections if they're different to our local ones, but anyway, keeping forecasted, and up to date in those areas is important. And any other industries that I've seen boom, I think there's sort of the focus. And SaaS industries. For some reason, SaaS industries seem to be booming as well. So if you sort of understand that, the different areas that you can have better luck with. Salary is another thing to mention. To be humble with salary is important, but never say that I'm looking to take anything. Never devalue yourself. If you're currently in a job that's 70 grand, you're worth 70 grand, or they would have fired you. So understand your worth, but say, I'm happy to take, a small hit. I'm happy to accept 65 grand. I've just been let go, what have you. But make sure you know where you're at, and you'll know what your minimum is, and you won't go below that minimum, or you make them feel that this is sort of the minimum that you need. Because as soon as someone says to me on the phone, I'll take anything, I've been working for 10 years, I'll take 50K, even 45, I think you're probably not good at your job. And it's an assumption, but it's an assumption that will be made. So understanding your worth, but being humble with your salary is also important. And then the last thing, which is probably the most important thing, or second most next to amending your application per role, is engaging with your network. So I think I've added a couple people, I've seen a couple of people's LinkedIns, and some people have maybe 50 connections, 23 connections. That's fine if you're the best in the industry and everyone knows it and you're just getting job offers left, right and center. But everyone else, you need to have a larger connection. So I would target everyone, to focus on that in the next sort of month, and to at least have a minimum between 200 to 500 connections, and make sure they're valuable connections. So you don't have to talk to people. If you feel awkward making conversation or commenting on posts, you don't like to do that, at least make sure you're following the right people. So the right people are recruiters in your area. So if you just search, if you're, business intelligence or data science, if you do, analytical recruiters, business intelligence recruiters. A lot of companies have specialists which focus purely on one area. So you will find there will be one person who does your level of recruitment in most different companies. So add those people, because if they're not advertising on Seek, they're just going to put a post up on LinkedIn. So you'll see it won't be an official job that's added. It will actually just be a short statement written on LinkedIn saying, needing our people immediately for a 4-week contract starting tomorrow. You'll see these happen quite a lot. So get recruiters who recruit in your space, add them all across the country, add them all, but mainly focus on the area that you're wishing to live in. So don't flood yourself with too many. You don't need some in Perth or overseas. So focus on that. So the other one is companies. So look at the companies that hire. It's quite easy to stalk companies. I mean, you can do it without a premium LinkedIn account. You can just type in jobs are, or seek are, or what have you, whatever you're looking for. You'll see a list of companies that will come up that are hiring or have hired in the the past. And then you can add those companies, like them on LinkedIn or follow them on LinkedIn. So that's the company side of things. And then look at the company on LinkedIn. So type in, if you find that, you know, KPMG are hiring a lot of R data scientists or what have you, type in KPMG and like the capital Boolean search, so A and D in capitals, and then R or data science or what have you. And you'll see a list of people that are currently working in that company. And you'll go, okay, there's lots of people in that company that have this job. It's a good company to follow. Or if you just type in the skill, you will see lots of different people from different companies who have that skill. So you'll start to work out, okay, these companies and these companies, I'll add all the people, add the hiring managers, add everyone else in that network who has that skill, because it'll become your network. And you'll start to have lots of people saying, oh, my company is looking for my, you know, a junior for me, or my company is looking for this. You'll see people reposting and sharing, and you'll start to realize the size of the network. So that is so essential and so important, because a lot of jobs aren't officially posted on traditional platforms. So that's sort of a key thing there. And I think that wraps up there. So I would love to answer any questions that anyone has. I'm sure I skimmed past some things, but yeah, let me know.
So after gathering some questions from the chat, so previously we have Sarah asked, is there any pros and cons comparison or like a list for different contract jobs?
Okay, yeah. So I'm assuming it's different lengths of contract, whether it's hourly or fixed term or day rate or things like that. Okay, so I sort of touched on that. So just ask it a slightly different way if I'm not answering it the right way. But when you're looking at between hourly or day rate, generally they'll just say hourly because there's a big chunk of work that needs to be done in a small amount of time. They've just budget for 4 weeks or 3 weeks or what have you. So you'll usually see that with shorter term contracts. The benefit is you make the most money in a short period of time though. So that's the trade-off. Day contracts generally go longer. You'll see some 3 months, but they'll generally be 6-month contracts. A lot of the time they'll be with larger companies that will look to renew that contract. So you'll generally have an extension. So there's a little bit more stability in a sort of a day rate contract. And when it comes to fixed term, the benefits are you will get annual leave and sick leave and all your other company benefits. So is that answering?
She added on to that, like she meant by employment, and she asked if you could provide a slide that about the different type of employment you mentioned before.
Sorry, I don't think I fully understand how to answer this one. Is there? So the question is the types of employment. Okay.
You can see that from the chat as well.
Okay, I'll just open the chat and see if it makes. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Is that referring to the casual, part-time, and permanent positions?
Okay. And so what was the question there? The casual, part-time, permanent, what the benefits of those ones are?
Yes, Sarah actually replied. So she meant about what's the difference between casual, part-time, and also permanent positions, what the pros and cons.
Oh, okay. So if you're looking, if you're looking at, so freelance and casual are a bit different. So casual, you'll usually have set hours per week. So they'll say we need you to complete 20 hours per week every week. That's what it's going to be. I don't care if you do it some on Monday, some on Wednesday. It might change, and every week they'll probably look at changing your hours for the week. So there's no particular benefit other than it usually accommodating you if you have something else on the go. So if you're studying or something like that, a casual usually will fit in better. It's usually quite flexible. When you're looking at part-time is actually fixed hours. So it usually is between 3.5 to 4 days per week, and it'll be fixed days that you're expected to be in that office for that length of time. So usually be between 20 to 25 hours per week. That would be typical, but it will generally be fixed. You will get company benefits being a part-timer, so your annually paid leave and other bonuses and incentives, but you won't get that as a contractor or freelance or a casual. So and the last one is freelance. So freelance is usually something someone does when they're quite good in their sector. They have a list of clients that know them and they give them sporadic work. So it's generally more popular in the design sector. So if you're a web designer or you're a graphics designer or something like that, you'll have several clients that will just come to you with a consistent work and updates, and you just fill it out in your own time and you just bill them for the hours that you work. So that's sort of the difference there. I will briefly mention ABN and PAYG. They're the two different ways that you will be paid in Australia. ABN is when you have listed your own company, so that can be a sole trader or a business. That means that you're consulting for yourself and you're invoicing someone for your time, whereas PAYG is just getting set up through their payment service. So they'll just set you up sort of through the traditional way. So ABN means that you will pay your own super generally, pay your own super to yourself and insurances. So you have to do that yourself at the end of tax time. Whereas PAYG, everything is paid for you in the money that you earned after everything is just credited directly into your account. So I hope that clears that one up.
Thanks. So we have another question regarding to the resume and wondering whether we should put our pictures or photos on that.
This is a controversial one. A lot of people have said don't do it because so there's pros and cons for both sides. I definitely still submit people who have photos on their resume. I never ask them to take it out, but I don't advise. I don't tell someone to put it on to make it better. So so there was a big sort of uproar, I guess, in Australia a few years ago. There's a lot of news articles about it where they were saying that people were hiring people that they thought were maybe more attractive or maybe female over someone else. But this sort of happens now more in the industry of hospitality, because, you know, or a customer service role where you're physically, you know, serving someone. So they might have a particular image that they're looking for in terms of, you know, neatness or what have you. If you're sitting in an office all day, it doesn't really matter. So I don't suggest, if you haven't done it already, to put it on because it doesn't really add any advantage. Plus, everyone, if they want to see what you look like, will go to your LinkedIn page. So it's sort of, you know, outdated.
Thank you. And another question from the chat from Kathy. She asked, are you finding that age is an issue, too young or too old?
Okay, so this is something I think you need to consider when it comes to your research. So it's something that I consider as a recruiter. So right now I have two roles on. I have a role with a millionaire who's 26 years old, started his own company, very ambitious. He's 26 years old. He doesn't want people in there who are in their late 20s or 30s, because it's you know, if you're around your parents are going to tell you what to do because they're older and they're your parents. Like, it's going to happen. If you're with your little sister, you're probably going to tell her what to do because she's younger than you and you feel authority over her. So it's just a typical human, you know, reaction, I guess. If you're looking into the LinkedIn account of a company you're applying for and everyone there is in their late 20s and you're sort of in your 40s, you probably just won't be the culture fit if you're the only one at that level, you know, because you want to work at a company where you fit in the culture and you can have things in common. You don't want to, you know, sort of be to the sidelines. So it is personality changes. I mean, some people in their 40s would suit that company for whatever reasons because that's the skill they need and everyone's, you know, similar to them. That's fine. But it is something to consider, and that might be a reason you're getting rejected if all applications are sort of younger than the owner and you're the only one older than the owner. It might come into, you know, like that. Younger, if you're talking about younger, usually the stigma is around skill. If you've been working for 2 years versus someone working 8 years, they probably think that you're more junior. So you really have to prove your intelligence, because I have had some extremely intelligent people with 2-3 years experience who have scored a 95% on a test where someone of 15 years experience scored 50. So it's sort of showing that you have innovation, you keep yourself up to date. And one thing I forgot to mention in the slideshow, and this is by showing that you've constantly been upskilling in your spare time. So put that on your resume as well, to show that you're the type of person who's ambitious, innovative, and keeps up to date. And that will help you stand out if you're younger and struggling to get a role.
Great, that's a great answer. So another question is looking for transacting into a new sector, and if there's any, what way should we present the transferable skills to the people who won't automatically be put off by employment in a different field?
That is a very good question. As a recruiter, we are paid to find a perfect match. If the perfect match comes directly, if someone who is not the perfect match comes directly, it's free. So do they pay for the perfect match, or do they get a free person who's not the perfect match? This is going to be the trade-off. If you're not a perfect match, it may be better to go directly to companies. You may find you have more success than going through a recruitment agency for that reason. It is a challenging one. So you need to demonstrate that you have either worked in that industry for whatever small, insignificant amount of time, or you have a passion or interest for that industry. So for example, if it's in the financial industry, and you've worked 15 years, when it's a short period of time, if you've worked 2 years in one industry, 2 years in another industry, and now you're applying for your third industry, it's probably not as seriously taken consideration because you're not expensive. You're quite a treat research. You can still be molded. It's when you start getting more senior in yours and you're starting to expect quite high salary that they're looking for something exactly the same. So it's something that I would suggest if you're really unhappy with your industry, you're looking to get into something else, try to do it in as early in your career as possible, because people pay a lot of money for skills in an industry that will help them. Otherwise, why are they paying so much, if that makes sense? If not, if you have been in an industry for a while, you're very passionate about moving industry, or there are just no other jobs, prove that you are by doing certificates that's relevant to that industry. If there's some sort of, I'm totally making this up, but if it's like an AWS financial certificate and you're looking to move into the financial industry, do those certificates in your own time and show that you can do that. Take on contracting work or take on freelance work. It's easier to sort of get short-term contracts in a new field than it would be to get a high-paid permanent job. Or your last resort is to make connections with the right people. If Joe, Gilberg and Mary have all colleagues of yours who have started working in an industry, or you know them from some way or another, they're going to help you get in. If it gives someone confidence if they can say, oh, you know this person, who are they? Like, should I go on a date with them or not? Should we hire them into the business? It gives them confidence. So the more people you know in a particular industry, the better off you are. Particularly if it's a certain company. So if that's going to be your strategy, or you just happen to know people, I would suggest target your approach to a particular company rather than the industry as a whole, because it might not be as effective in that way. But those are probably the options that I would suggest.
Great, thank you for that. And another question, I think is quite related to most of us. For me especially, because I also heard about this as well from other agencies. Is it disadvantage to use a foreign name? If you have choice, is it better to alienate for your resume? Are they related to your periods, like visa stats, those kind of related questions?
Okay. I mean, I'm all about equal opportunity. I do not discriminate, but that is me. And I can't speak for every single hiring person in Australia. I think if you have on your resume that you're a permanent resident or a citizen, if you have either of those things, keep your full name. It should not be an issue. There is absolutely no reason. If you're sort of brand new to the country and just moved to the country, I'm just going to say it's up to you. But I think at the end of the day, there's a few reasons why it's your benefit. First of all, if you have a different name, or you're especially I think it's all women, isn't it, today? So females generally have a bit of an advantage. I'm not sure if this is common knowledge, but companies often have a quota, which means that there's a term for it. I think it's just diversity. So diversity quota. What this means is they've implemented a regime within the company to say that we need to have equal women to equal men. We need to have equal, different cultures to show that we are a company that's not racist, because Australia is now scared to be branded as racist. So these quotas are in place to have equal opportunity for all people. So if there's 15 men applying for a job and 2 women, it's probably quite likely one of those women will be, if all the skills are quite similar, that they will be sort of brought in. So some people, if your name, this is something I will mention, if your name is, not something that any person would know, like myself, I'm not familiar with Chinese names. If I see a name I don't know, sometimes if it's a female or a male, I would put, if you don't change it to an English name, then I would put a Ms. or Mr. So that would be my suggestion, to do that. You'll see that quite common on LinkedIn profiles now. So I would suggest to do that.
That's
or
great.
non-binary, if you're non-binary. Just whatever your title is, I put your title there.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
No.
Yeah, but that's okay. I think we'll still do a breakout room section. So we can stay, if you like to networking a little bit, we can stay, and then I'll put everybody in a breakout room.
Okay, I will just sort of end by saying, I think there's a couple of people, I think, I'm not sure if you're happy for me to say this, Dodo, but I think yourself and another member tonight have contacted me for some advice before. So if you have any questions, I guess, about my service or what it's like, or if it's worth it, or what have you, I'm not sure. I haven't actually asked Dido, but I'm sure she's more than happy to sort of ask and answer questions about that as well. But I've got my website, which I can share, and if you're interested to learn more, I'll put that out there. So yeah, happy to answer any questions about that as well. But thank you so much for having me tonight. It was lovely to chat to everyone. I really hope it was beneficial. And like I said, more than happy to answer any further questions that come out later.
Thank you. So